This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles, and joining me today is from our EBC Vietnam Bureau. Hello, Ralph.
Hello, Xin Chao. I'm Ralph Mando Penpai from the EBC Vietnam Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN.
On today's headlines. The United States targeted Myanmar's police chief and an army special operations commander with sanctions on Monday over the government's deadly crackdown on pro-democracy protests.
President Duterte admitted that closing businesses amid a spike in COVID-19 cases nationwide would spell disaster for the Philippine economy.
Chinese vessels gathered near a disputed reef in the South China Sea are fishing boats sheltering from poor weather. That, according to the Foreign Ministry on Monday, a day after the Philippines described their presence as an incursion.
A North Korean national extradited to the United States from Malaysia appeared in court on Monday to face money laundering charges.
First, to the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, the United States targeted Myanmar's police chief and an army special operations commander with sanctions on Monday over the government's deadly crackdown on pro-democracy protests. The U.S. Treasury placed sanctions on Police Chief Tan Lang and Lieutenant General Ang So, saying both were responsible for using lethal force that has left scores dead in recent weeks. The protesters have taken to the streets in large numbers to oppose the military seizure of power in January. The Treasury noted that at the outset of the protests, security forces had used a non-lethal force to counter demonstrators. But since Tan Lang was made police chief and deputy home affairs minister on February 2, Burma's police have engaged in brutal attacks of violence against pro-democracy protesters, it said. Ang So, it said, was also responsible for sending in troops to confront the protesters using battlefield weapons and tactics, demonstrating that lethal force is being used in a planned, premeditated, and coordinated manner against the anti-coup protests. The sanctions also named 2 Army infantry divisions involved in putting down the protests. The sanctions seek to block those named from doing business with Americans and accessing the global financial system, and freezes any assets they might have under U.S. jurisdiction.
European Union Minister for Foreign Affairs Joseph Borrell says that the bloc is imposing sanctions against individuals and entities for human rights violations, including China, Russia, and Myanmar.
On Myanmar, we took stock of the situation in the country, which sadly continues to deteriorate dramatically following the military coup. There are more than 250 people killed. 250 people killed by the army using armed wars against the demonstrators. We have imposed sanctions against 11 individuals responsible for the ongoing repression.
The EU placed Myanmar junta chief Min Aung Hlaing on an assets freeze and visa ban blacklist Monday over a coup and crackdown on demonstrators, the bloc's official journal said. I quote in a statement, Commander-in-Chief Min Aung Hlaing has been directly involved in and responsible for decision-making concerning state functions and is therefore responsible for undermining democracy and the rule of law in Myanmar, unquote, the listing said. It said that the army chief was directly responsible for a brutal crackdown by the authorities in the wake of the February 1 seizure of power. The 27-nation bloc also added 9 other senior military officers and the head of Myanmar's election commission to the list. The listings approved by foreign ministers at a meeting in Brussels on Monday represent the EU's first punitive measures over the country. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the military ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi last month, triggering a massive crisis that security forces have sought to crush with a campaign of violence and fear. European diplomats have said businesses tied to the military will likely be placed under sanctions in the coming weeks.
Meanwhile, 5 people are feared dead and at least 20,000 Rohingya have fled. A huge blaze engulfing shanty homes at refugee camps in southeastern Bangladesh, according to officials, in the third fire to hit the settlements in 4 days. Take a look.
বস্তুতে আমরা পানিবাহী গাড়ির সাহায্যে আগুনটাকে ব্লক দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করি, কিন্তু সিলিন্ডারের ব্যাপকতার কারণে আমাদের ব্যাগ পেতে হচ্ছে খুব। আমরা সেটা মোকাবেলা করে আমরা আগুন নিয়ন্ত্রণের জন্য চেষ্টা করছি।
এটা ইয়াতে দিয়ে দেন, মেইল গ্রুপে দিয়ে দেন।
Nearly 1 million of the Muslim minority from Myanmar, many of whom fled a military crackdown in their homeland in 2017, live in cramped and squalid conditions at the camps in the Cox's Bazar district. Officials said the fire apparently started in one of the 34 camps, which span about 8,000 acres of land, before spreading to 3 other camps, with refugees fleeing the shanties with whatever belongings they could carry. Thick columns of smoke could be seen billowing from blazing shanties in videos shared on social media as hundreds of firefighters and aid workers battled the flames and pulled the refugees to safety. It is a massive fire. At least 20,000 people fled their homes as the fire spread, Cox's Bazar administrator Mamunur Rashid told AFP. A Save the Children volunteer, Taiba Begum, said people were screaming and running, and there were children. They were also running, scattered, crying for their family. It is the third fire in 4 days to hit the settlements in the Cox's Bazar district that houses nearly 1 million of the Muslim minority from Myanmar.
Security forces in Myanmar have reportedly occupied more than 60 schools and university campuses, the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, said on Friday. In at least one incident, security forces reportedly beat 2 teachers while entering the premises and left several others injured. The agency said in a joint statement with the UN Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, and the NGO Save the Children. They said in a statement, these incidents mark a further escalation of the current crisis and represent a serious violation of the rights of children. Schools must not be used by security forces under any circumstances, unquote. The development comes amid continuing violence linked to protests against the February 1 coup by the country's military. The UN agencies warned that the occupation will exacerbate the learning crisis for almost 12 million children and youth in Myanmar, which was already under tremendous pressure owing to the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing widespread closures. They urged security forces to vacate occupied premises immediately and ensure that they are not used by military or security personnel.
In other news, President Duterte admitted that closing businesses and a spike in COVID cases nationwide would spell disaster for the Philippine economy. In a pre-recorded public address, the president made the statement after he approved placing Metro Manila, Bulacan, Cavite, Laguna, and Rizal under a general community quarantine bubble until April 4 to curb the spread of COVID-19. And he acknowledged that the surge in cases could be due to the fact that many areas in Metro Manila are heavily laden with people, including Divisoria, Manila's famous flea market. Let's listen in.
So alam na ho ninyo kung anong hanggang saan kayo. Nandito, the highest is the NCR. Alam mo kasi nanonood ako ng TV, and every time COVID is being discussed, they play a certain footage of yun sa Divisoria. Oh, how can you... I was just trying to how can you control the people there? It's just a small place. There are so many thousands there trying to wriggle in and out of yan ang mahirap. Because of the space na wala, kasi tapos dumating itong pandemya, dito tayo nahirapan. So kung sirahan mo naman yan lahat, medyo tagilid na ang ekonomiya. And that's a problem. It will be disaster for our country. Kung sarahan mo talaga lahat, it would be disaster for the country. So balance na lang tayo.
The president also defended his decision to impose additional restrictions in Metro Manila and 4 nearby provinces, stressing that the state can control the movement of the people, especially under a prevailing health crisis. On Sunday, President Duterte approved additional restrictions in Metro Manila and 4 nearby provinces for 2 weeks to cut by 25% the number of COVID cases nationwide. Currently, operational capacities of essential and non-essential services industries will be maintained subject to minimum health standards. Gyms and fitness centers inside the GCQ bubble are allowed to operate up to 75% of their capacity, while spas are allowed to operate up to 50% capacity. The operation of gyms, fitness centers, and spas is subject to adherence to safety protocols and minimum public health standards, particularly in the prohibition of aggregation in communal areas such as pantries and canteens, among others. Now, these establishments will only be allowed to operate depending on the local government units. Quezon City has prohibited the operation of these establishments. In restaurants, only outdoor dining will be allowed at 50% capacity, provided that engineering and administrative controls are in place, like acrylic or small dividers, limiting to 2 persons per table, among others. Indoor dining in restaurants, cafes, and similar establishments will be limited to delivery and take-out only.
The head of the UN Health Agency said the growing gap between the number of vaccines being given in rich countries and those administered through COVAX is becoming more grotesque every day. Let's listen in.
The gap between the number of vaccines administered in rich countries and the number of vaccines administered through COVAX is growing every single day and becoming more grotesque every day. Countries that are now vaccinating younger, healthy people at low risk of disease are doing so at the cost of the lives of health workers, older people, and other at-risk groups in other countries. The world's poorest countries wonder whether rich countries really mean what they say when they talk about solidarity. The inequitable distribution of vaccines is not just a moral outrage. It's also economically and epidemiologically self-defeating. If countries would share vaccines for the right reasons, we appeal to them to do it out of self-interest. There are some countries that have set a great example. The Republic of Korea, despite being a high-income country that could easily afford to buy vaccines through bilateral deals, has waited its turn for vaccines through COVAX. WHO is continuing to work day and night to find solutions to increase the production and equitable distribution of vaccines.
Not least, we also have Dr. Teresa Kasaiwa, the director.
So far, AstraZeneca is the only company that has committed to not profiting from its COVID-19 vaccine during the pandemic. And so far, it's the only vaccine developer that has made a significant contribution to vaccine equity by licensing its technology to several other companies, including SK Bio in the Republic of Korea and the Serum Institute of India, which are producing more than 90% of the vaccines that have so far been distributed through COVAX. We need more vaccine producers to follow this example and license their technology to other companies.
And agencies that are procuring it.
And our big concern remains the concern that these vaccines aren't getting to the most vulnerable and needy populations in every country around the world. The issue right now is there's simply not enough vaccine to get to the healthcare workers of the low-income countries and to get to the obviously the older populations in those countries. And right now, this is not a financial issue. Right now, this is a problem of access to the product itself. So it's not a differential issue around vaccines and vaccine prices. The issue right now is the control of the supply is held by a limited number of countries that have procured most of the doses and the early access to those doses. And what we're trying to do is find mechanisms, whether through dose sharing, through donations, through exchanging places in the queue for contracts so that we can move up the line further those doses that need to go to the COVAX facility so that they can get to populations everywhere.
To Indonesia now, where COVID-19 cases rose by 5,744 within one day to 1,465,928, with the death toll adding by 161 to 39,711, according to the Health Ministry. According to the ministry, 7,177 more people were discharged from hospitals, bringing the total number of recovered patients to 1,297,967. The virus has spread to all the country's 34 provinces, specifically within the past 24 hours. Jakarta recorded 1,474 new cases, West Java 1,253, Central Java 741, Banten 440, and East Java 270. No new positive cases were found, meanwhile, in two provinces, namely West Kalimantan and Southeast Sulawesi. From Indonesia, we go now to Thailand, where the country has shortened its quarantine period for arrivals effective next month. Let's get the details from Faye Barte joining us live. Hello, Faye.
Good afternoon to you, Alma, and to all our viewers. Yes, there has been an announcement from the CCSA, and we also gathered this information from the Bangkok Post, that we need to remember three things when there is an inbound travel going here in the Kingdom of Thailand. The first one that we need to remember, Alma, is the quarantine period is shortened from 14 days to 10 days only. And however, from the countries that has the new variant, or there is active cases of COVID-19 and there are a lot of COVID-19 cases, the quarantine should remain in 14 days. The second one that we should remember, that travelers will be allowed to conduct activities outside of the quarantine facilities. So for example, they are in a quarantine facility or a hotel, they can buy food in the premises only. They can use the fitness system or the gym. They can also use the swimming pool, and they can also do the exercising outdoors, but in the premises only of the quarantine facility. The third and the last one that we need to remember when they have to travel here inside the kingdom, a fit to fly health certificate will no longer be required for the foreign nationals. So, however, a negative COVID-19 RT-PCR test certificate issued no more than 72 hours is still required for them to enter here in the kingdom. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Faye, for your updates there. Looking forward to, as we know, the variants is spreading all around the world, and it's making it more transmissible, more contagious, rather. But anyways...
yes, it is. You are correct.
Thank you very much, Faye, and looking forward to more updates coming out of Thailand. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. This is Faye Barte reporting live from Bangkok, Thailand Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
All right. Thank you. All right, let's go now to the island nation of Maldives. Joining us live is Steffi Dewan. Hello, Steffi.
Hi, Alma. Good afternoon to you and to all the televiewers around the world. So here's the latest update from Maldives today. Is Maldives in a state which still requires a declaration of a public health emergency? This is the question raised by Horafushi MP Ahmad Salim during the parliament meeting yesterday. He said that the country had spent nearly a year in a state of public health emergency. He submitted an emergency motion calling to provide compensation for cafes and restaurant businesses whose income was adversely affected in light of COVID-19 measures. MP Salim said that the constantly renewed state of public health emergency in the nation was inflicting a lot of damage on cases on cafes and restaurant businesses. The damage was so severe that businesses were on the brink of bankruptcy and unsure whether they can ever recover. He also said that the most of the public were reliant on these businesses for food, and that the public would also go out for businesses if this establishment were open, which meant that the entire economy was facing difficulties due to the measures implemented in light of COVID-19, which were stopping such businesses and other operations. The MP called on the authorities to take swift mitigative actions to reduce the impact on such businesses due to the state of public health emergency measures. He called to do this by providing compensation, easing of rent and lease payments to the government, ensuring that steady supply of electricity and water without any interruptions for a specific time period. Ease of GST payments, negate any discrimination between different types of businesses, and allow such businesses to operate in line with HPA guidelines. MP Salim admitted that COVID-19 was a dangerous disease and that all measures to stay safe from the virus must be undertaken. However, even if things are like this, I don't believe that we should leave these businesses who rely on the measures to go bankrupt by maintaining the state of public health emergency after almost a year of the pandemic by still viewing it as an emergency situation, according to MP Salim. The MP also questioned the purpose of closing down restaurants and cafe earlier and allowing shops to remain open, before also noting that the people gather while on foot as well. Authorities in the Maldives yesterday permitted cafes and restaurants to be kept open until 10:30 in the evening, amending an earlier order for such establishments to be closed by 8 o'clock in the evening. However, union representing such an establishment have called to extend the hours to 1:30 in the morning. Parliament Speaker Mohamed Nasheed has also called to release all measures on cafes and restaurants. And that's my quick update from Maldives. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Steph, for your updates today.
Thank you so much, Alma. Reporting live from Maldives, this is Stephanie Huan, and we live in interesting times.
All right. Ralph and I will be back right after this short break.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Kumanta, sumaya tayong lahat. Saya-saya.
Welcome back to the program. To Cambodia now, where the Prime Minister just announces a 3-day Khmer New Year holiday. Let's get the details from Crystal Ann Balasaros from our EBC Cambodia Bureau. Hi there, Crystal.
Hi, Ralph. For Cambodia's recent news, Prime Minister Hun Sen has decided to allow 3 days off for this year's Khmer New Year celebration after last year's holidays were cancelled over the pandemic. In a directive issued yesterday, Mr. Hun Sen said the days off would be from April 14 to April 16, but urged everyone to follow the Health Ministry's health measures to prevent and contain the COVID-19 outbreak. He said all staff and employees of state institutions are allowed to take 3 days off as mentioned on the calendar of public holidays. He said for private sector employees, the 3-day holiday can be given in 2 ways, depending on the agreement between the employers and the employees of each company in accordance with the sub-decree dated August 26, 2020 on the calendar of holidays for civil servants, employees, and workers for 2021. He also instructed employers to discuss with workers if they are willing to work as usual, instead in return for adding the 3 days to the Chumben Festival or any upcoming holiday as agreed upon according to the labor law. The Ministry of Labor will issue more instructions on this directive in accordance with the labor law. Mr. Hun Sen also instructed relevant ministries and institutions to take necessary measures to better manage and ensure security, safety, and public order, as well as ensure the observance and implementation of health measures to stem the spread of COVID-19. The government also called on all citizens to avoid unnecessary travel to or from areas or places believed to have been at high risk of transmission of COVID-19. It said that people should refrain from organizing various ceremonies, including rituals or gatherings. Meanwhile, the government also appealed to transportation companies not to increase passenger passport fees and to take care to implement health measures seriously and steadfastly for the passengers in their vehicles to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The National Trade Unions Coalition, or NTUC, on Wednesday sent a letter to the Ministry of Labor requesting that the government cancel the upcoming traditional Khmer New Year this year due to fears over the COVID-19 pandemic. They said the spread of COVID-19 in Cambodia, especially after the community outbreak on February 20, the country has seen a striking increase in the number of infections. Contacted yesterday, President of NTUC Far Salih said he regrets the government's move but respects Mr. Hun Sen's decision. The government last year announced the cancellation of the 2020 Khmer New Year holidays to mitigate risk of COVID-19 transmission in the kingdom. However, Mr. Hun Sen at that time granted a 5-day holiday substitute in August over the cancellation. At that time, he issued an order for a week-long ban on all travel across the country from one province to another in a move to stem the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. Back to you, Ralph.
Thank you for your updates and for your time, Crystal. Stay safe and healthy there in Cambodia.
You too, Ralph. Reporting live here in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, I am Crystal Ann Ballesteros, and we live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, the first batch of 1.3 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccine from the COVAX facility will be delivered to Vietnam on March 25, according to the Ministry of Health. The Southeast Asian country is set to receive 30 million doses through the COVAX facility, a global pooled procurement mechanism for COVID-19 vaccines through which COVAX will ensure fair and equitable access to vaccines for all 190 participating economies. Using an allocation framework formulated by WHO, the next delivery of 2.8 million doses is expected on April 25, said the ministry. Vietnam began the first wave of vaccination program on March 8 after receiving 117,600 AstraZeneca vaccine doses, with 32,361 frontliners in 13 cities and provinces vaccinated to date. These localities have been hit by the third wave of local transmissions since January 27, 2021. The program has been placed under strict supervision of the Ministry of Health. Last week, the ministry released guidance on health screening before COVID-19 vaccination for people aged 18 and above. Accordingly, the following people will not be vaccinated against COVID-19: people with acute diseases, pregnant women, breastfeeding women, people with impaired immune responses, end-stage cancer patients, patients with decompensated cirrhosis, users of high dose of corticosteroids, chemotherapy and radiation treatment within 14 days, recipients of immunoglobulin and COVID-19 plasma treatment within last 90 days, recipients of other vaccines within 14 days, and those infected with COVID-19 within last 6 months, and people aged 65 or above, people suffering thrombotic type anemia or blood clotting disorders. As of 6:05 in the morning on Monday, Vietnam confirmed 2,572 COVID-19 infection cases, including 2,198 recoveries and 35 fatalities.
In other news, Chinese vessels gathered near a disputed reef in the South China Sea are fishing boats sheltering from poor weather. That is according to the Foreign Ministry, a day after the Philippines described their presence as an incursion. The Philippines on Sunday said more than 200 militia boats were spotted in line formation at the boomerang-shaped Whitsun Reef, around 320 kilometers west of Palawan Island on March 7. Manila called on China to immediately recall these boats, violating our maritime rights and encroaching into our sovereign territory, they said. But Beijing disputed the claim. Take a look.
我想告诉你的是，刘鄂礁是南沙群岛的一部分。长期以来呢，中方的渔船也一直在该礁的附近海域捕鱼。近期是由于海况的原因，中方的一些渔船在刘鄂礁附近避风，我想这是非常正常的，也希望呢各方都能够理性的看待。
The Philippines Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin said on Twitter that he had lodged a diplomatic protest over the vessels. An aerial patrol of the reef on Monday detected around 183 vessels. The Armed Forces of the Philippines Chief Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobejana said in a statement, Beijing often invokes the so-called 9-dash line to justify its apparent historic rights over most of the South China Sea, parts of which were also claimed by Taiwan, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Brunei. Now, China has ignored a 2016 International Tribunal decision that declared its assertion as without basis.
Around 183 vessels believed to be Chinese maritime militia were sighted by a Philippine Maritime Air Patrol on Monday, Julian Felipe Reef in the West Philippine Sea, which is well within the country's exclusive economic zone. I quote in a statement from our MARPAT or Maritime Patrol yesterday, we sighted around 183 vessels believed to be CMM, said Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobejana, the Armed Forces of the Philippines chief, in a message to reporters Monday night. The information came from the AFP's Western Command, based in Puerto Princesa City, Palawan, after it deployed a fixed-wing aircraft to fly over the area around 8:40 in the morning on Monday and completed its patrol at around 11:30 a.m. Sobejana added that the AFP and the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea are assessing the best course of action for this incursion. For now, he said the AFP's maritime patrols will continue to determine if the Chinese vessels in the West Philippine Sea are increasing or decreasing. Earlier, the NTF, WPS, West Philippine Sea expressed concern about the Philippine Coast Guard report that around 220 Chinese fishing vessels believed to be manned by Chinese maritime militia personnel were sighted in line formation at the Julian Felipe Reef on March 7. The reef is a large boomerang-shaped shallow coral reef at the northeast of Pagkakaisa Banks and Reefs. Union Reefs located approximately 175 nautical miles west of Bataraza, Palawan.
In other news, a North Korean national extradited to the United States from Malaysia appeared on Monday to face money laundering charges. Moon Chol-myong, 55, is the first North Korean national ever to be extradited to the U.S., according to the Department of Justice. Moon was not extradited by North Korea but brought to the U.S. from another foreign country where he had been detained since May 2019, according to the department in a statement. The Justice Department did not identify the country involved, but North Korea severed diplomatic ties with Malaysia and closed its embassy on Sunday to protest Moon's extradition. Pyongyang called it an unpardonable crime carried out under blind obedience to American pressure. The Justice Department said Moon is accused of laundering money through the U.S. financial system between April 2013 and November 2018 to provide luxury items to North Korea. The indictment alleges that Moon defrauded banks and laundered money in an effort to evade counter-proliferation sanctions imposed on North Korea by the U.S. and the United Nations. That, according to Assistant Attorney General John Demers. He said, we will continue to use the long reach of our laws to protect the American people from sanctions, evasion, and other national security threats. Alan Kohler, an FBI agent, said one of the FBI's biggest counterintelligence challenges is bringing overseas defendants to justice, especially in the case of North Korea. He said, thanks to the FBI's partnership with foreign authorities, we are proud to bring Moon Chol-myong to the U.S. and to face justice, and we hope, he said, he will be the first of many. The Justice Department said Moon made an initial appearance on Monday in federal court in Washington. He faces 6 counts of money laundering in transactions valued at over $1.5 million US. The indictment alleges that Moon was affiliated with North Korea's primary intelligence organization, the Reconnaissance General Bureau. Malaysia had been one of Pyongyang's few allies, but ties were already strained following the 2017 assassination of leader Kim Jong-un's half-brother at the Kuala Lumpur airport. After Pyongyang cut ties, Malaysia gave North Korean diplomats 48 hours to leave the country. On Sunday, the North Korean flag and a plaque were taken down from the country's embassy, a large house in an upmarket area of Kuala Lumpur, and the gates were chained up. Malaysia denounced Pyongyang's move and announced it would close its mission in North Korea, whose operations had already been suspended since the murder of Kim Jong-un's half-brother.
Can you see this?
Meanwhile, in the U.S., hundreds gathered in Washington, D.C. to protest violence and racism against Asian Americans after shootings at 3 massage parlors in the Atlanta area left 8 people dead, including 6 women of Asian descent.
It's telling me that people are fed up. People won't be silenced anymore. People are looking for change. People are yearning for change and healing. People want to do something. And I'm glad to be the one who sparked, and I hope that this conversation will go on as we will.
The intertwining of racism and misogyny that is lately, but it's an increase in reported hate.
Protests took place in major cities including Atlanta, where the shooting occurred, New York and Washington, as well as a protest in Montreal, Canada. The shooter, Robert Aaron Law, was arrested Tuesday after opening fire in 3 Asian massage parlors in Atlanta and the city's suburbs. He admitted to the crime and was charged with murder. But during his interrogation, Long denied he had been motivated by racial hatred, claiming instead he had a sexual addiction and wanted to eliminate a temptation.
And back to the ongoing crisis in Myanmar. UN Acting Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator in Myanmar, Andrew Kirkwood, said the future of the country is at stake, adding that the current crisis also has important regional implications. He spoke at a virtual press conference from his residence in Myanmar's capital, Yangon. Take a look.
Thank you for passing on our thanks to you.
At least 211 people have been killed in the last 7 weeks, and possibly many more. And this includes at least 15 children, some as young as 14. And I think it's really important to emphasize that many of these people have been killed through gunshots to the head by snipers for peaceful demonstrations. And the army and the police have definitely increased the violence over the last couple of weeks in an attempt to get control of the situation. But the protests and the resistance continues. It's led by doctors and nurses and teachers and truck drivers and farmers who have all coalesced under this civil disobedience movement, or the CDM. It's really kind of hard to convey the significance of the events of the last 7 weeks, but I think it's fair to say that really the future of the country is at stake, and it's a historic moment for the country for sure, but I think it's also a really important moment for the region. I don't think there's any question that there are important regional implications of the current crisis. I think that the Secretary General has been clear, the Special Envoy has been clear, many others have been clear, and we've been consistently clear in country that in our messaging, the killing has got to stop. The arbitrary detentions really have to stop, and there has to be a respect. There has to be a respect by the authorities of fundamental freedoms and human rights. That said, we are doing everything we can in the current situation, and there is still frustration amongst the people here that the international community hasn't done more to date.
In other news, the Royal Thai Army has denied supplying rice to units of Myanmar's armed forces, saying that any food being sent over the border was part of normal trade. Thai media reported that the army had supplied 700 sacks of rice to Myanmar army units on Myanmar's eastern border, quoting an unidentified security official as saying it was on the orders of the Thai government. Thai media said the Myanmar army units being supplied near the border had been cut off by forces of the Karen National Union, or KNU, an ethnic minority insurgent group that agreed to a ceasefire with the Myanmar government in 2012. A KNU spokesman did not respond to requests for comment. The KNU has thrown its support behind the Myanmar democracy movement and condemned the military's coup and crackdown. Thai media showed pictures of what appeared to be bags of rice being loaded into trucks at the border. Pictures seen by Reuters showed men, some in camouflage uniform, crossing into Thailand and having their temperatures checked. Major General Amnat Shrima, commander of the Northeast Task Force, stressed in a statement that the Thai army is not supplying the Myanmar army, and there has been no contact from the Myanmar army requesting help or demanding any assistance from us because they have their own honor. Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc has urged relevant ministries and agencies to consider gradual resumption of international flights and stay prepared for application of vaccination passports. Speaking at a meeting on Wednesday, the government chief said prompt and unprecedented measures have been deployed to contain spread of the third wave of COVID-19. However, the fight against the pandemic is not over. Thus, the nation must continue staying vigilant as many new variants have been detected around the world, including ASEAN member countries, said Prime Minister Phuc. He also reaffirmed the government's resolve to continue pursuing the dual goal of pandemic management and economic recovery, adding that it is a really difficult task that requires wisdom and timely action. Phuc called for another package to support businesses and people affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, as many of them are still suffering from critical difficulties, especially those working in the tourism sector. He ordered the Ministry of Health to administer COVID-19 vaccines to frontliners in a safe manner before getting all people vaccinated, while speeding up research and development of homegrown vaccines to put into use no later than 2022.
Meanwhile, President Duterte on Monday reiterated that the approved loans made by the Philippines to purchase COVID-19 vaccines are still with multilateral lenders. This after Senators Panfilo Lacson and Risa Ontiveros questioned where the funds for the COVID-19 vaccines are. Let's listen in.
Ang buong akala kasi nila, yung pera na bilyon na ibinigay nila sa Kongreso, nandiyan na sa kamay natin, that it's called cash. At nasaan na yung pera. Sinasabi na natin time and again that the money is with the lending bank.
Still.
So we have not used any single centavo of it because as a matter of fact, about the vaccines that we are going to buy, pero donated ito lahat sa ngayon.
Sa ngayon, donated pa?
What is in our hands are the donated vaccines.
Di donated, I think 500,000 lang eh. 500,000 doses lang eh.
Yeah, and the 400, you're referring to Sinovac.
Yes.
China.
Yes.
Well, China gave us 500,000 free. Tapos magdagdag sila ng 400,000 more. So that would make it 1 million. Yan, walang bayad yan. So, libre yan. Ngayon, itong dadating, I think, day after tomorrow, is it? Dadating na yung binabayaran natin. Ay yung babayaran pala natin. Doon pa dapat sila magtanong kung nasaan na yung pera. And I am not really, ang pagkaakala ko sa commercial law ko, Pag maghiram ka ng pera sa bangko, magbayad ka, it is not done by money. Kailangan po 5 truck dyan bago kakutin yung pera na yan. Yan po ay papel lang. And, you know, if you are afraid of corruption, let your mind go easy because these things are not susceptible to anything. The money is in the hands of the bank and they collect yung nagpabili sa atin ng bakuna from the bank. Hindi sa atin na pumunta yan kay Sunny Dominguez na bubuksan niya yung drawer. Sabi niya, ito na yung pangbayad. Hindi ho.
So, the total financing we have for the vaccines, logistics, and other supplies, including waste disposal, is 82.5 billion pesos.
So, sana yung pera na billion dyan, nasa kamay ba natin yan ngayon?
Hindi po, nasa bangko pa. Kasi we did not withdraw yet. Kasi we will only withdraw when we pay.
Yes.
Because why should we hold the money? Kasi babayad tayo ng interest eh. So, mientras tanto na hindi pa na-deliver, hindi pa due ang payment, we'll keep it in the bank first.
Climate change has hit the world's oceans hard, UN weather experts said on Monday, in a call for resumption of monitoring that was interrupted by COVID-19 and for investment in warning systems to protect coastal communities at risk. In an alert that warmer seas helped to fuel a record Atlantic hurricane season last year, along with major tropical cyclones in the Indian and South Pacific Oceans. The World Meteorological Organization said that big geographical and research gaps remain in the global ocean observing system. The COVID-19 crisis made matters worse when in March 2020, governments and oceanographic institutions recalled nearly all their research vessels home. This reduced the capacity of commercial ships to contribute vital ocean and weather observations, meaning that systems could not be maintained and in some cases fail, the UN agency said. According to WMO, average sea level rose by around 15 centimeters last century, but projections show that future increases could be 4 times that by the end of the 21st, even if global warming is limited to well below 2 degrees Celsius. About 40% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of the coast.
Thank you very much, Ralph, for keeping me company today on our news program. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy, always.
It's my pleasure, Alma, reporting from the ASEAN Bureau. This is Ralph Quanto, AAPI Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.